Welcome to Nice and Blunt. The NFL draft is officially over, so let's talk about the running back position. These are my most valuable rookie running backs in 2022. There were 22 running backs taken in this year's draft, and let's go pick by pick, round by round, and talk about each of them. At the top, the number one running back taken was Breece Hall out of Iowa State. And he's 5'11", 217. I'm very excited for what Breece Hall can do, but I'm a little bit concerned about his landing spot because the New York Jets do not have a good track record for success. And even though he's going to be their number one back, they're going to use him a lot. I just don't trust Zach Wilson. So the touchdown upside is kind of scarce for the Jets. And there's also a lot of other weapons to feed. So they're more of a passing offense, especially in garbage time. But their offensive line did not help them very much last year. Breece Hall should be a consistent floor play at the running back position, but I do not expect him to vault into the top 10 his rookie year like we've seen in the past with players like Najee Harris or Saquon Barkley when they are the first running backs drafted. So temper expectations for him, but he will contribute a lot in the Jets offense. Even though Michael Carter is there, Breece Hall is their main back. The second running back taken was Kenneth Walker III, who went to Seattle, and he's coming from Michigan State. He's 5'9", 211, so kind of short. However, I think he's definitely going to get the bulk of the carries this year because you can't really trust Chris Carson to stay healthy. I think he's more of a pass catcher. And Rashad Penny, while he did get a one-year deal, is not a player that you can count on either. I think Kenneth Walker will get the job all to himself in training camp, and by week one, be their main running back. But again, I hate the offense. I think the Seahawks could be even worse than the Jets with their quarterback situation. They have Drew Lock and Geno Smith going to battle it out. I have no idea who's getting that job, to be honest with you. But either way, this offense is not going to score very much, and DK Metcalf is going to be a focal point in the red zone. So my expectations for Kenneth Walker are kind of low. I think he's going to be around like running back 25 or so. It's going to be more of a floor play that's volume driven rather than touchdown driven. But the third running back taken has a ton of upside because of his landing spot. I was hoping the Buffalo Bills would take Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, but they ended up taking James Cook in the late second round. He could have a ton of fantasy value in Buffalo. He may not get the most touches because Devin Singletary is still there, and I still think he's their main running back. But Zach Moss was really underwhelming last year. They completely gave up on him after some healthy scratches. He's going to get that workload all to himself. So a lot of receptions, a lot of goal line work, and James Cook, while he may only get 10 or 12 touches a game, will be very valuable on a per-touch basis. So he has some value. He could explode. And if anything happens to Devin Singletary, he would immediately be a top 12 running back. So James Cook has a lot of value. I think this year he will be an important flex play. But after this, it gets hard to be convinced that any of these running backs are going to contribute a lot in their rookie seasons, mainly because of the landing spots. The fourth running back taken was Rachaad White. I had him at number 3 in my pre-draft rankings. Going to Tampa Bay, he has elite upside if anything were to happen to Leonard Fournette, but until that does happen, he's no more than a handcuff. Ronald Jones isn't there, but there's only about 6 or 8 touches per game that are open for him, and I'm just not really convinced that he has much value aside from a Fournette handcuff. So more of a waiver wire play, and that's kind of the case for everyone. But the number 5 running back taken, Tyrion Davis-Price, is a player I overlooked in my pre-draft rankings. So I need to do a little more research on him. However, the fact that he goes to San Francisco is a great sign that you can trust his talent, because I really believe in the 49ers run scheme. Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing, but it's kind of hard to say that he's guaranteed this job because it was Elijah Mitchell's last year, and he was a 6th round pick who only got the job once Raheem Mostert went down, and they did draft Trey Sermon in the 3rd round. So that never worked out. I think drafting Tyrion Davis-Price is a real clear sign of that. And I think this job is kind of up for grabs this offseason. But expect less volume this year because Trey Lance will be the quarterback. And I think he'll probably have about 6 or 8 rush attempts per game. Deebo Samuel has yet to be traded, and even though he doesn't want to be a running back anymore, I still expect him to get several touches throughout the season in the backfield. So there isn't as much volume available in San Francisco, but there is elite upside if Tyrion Davis-Price were to claim this job all to himself. He's 6'2", 211 out of LSU, and you never know. 49ers running backs can be league winners, but they can also be huge headaches, and it's kind of risky to really invest in him this season. We're going to need to monitor this training camp news and see who comes out of this backfield on top entering the season. But the third running back taken in the third round was Brian Robinson Jr. out of Alabama. He's 6'2", 225, and he could have a big role on the goal line. But although he had a huge workload last year, he's more of a thorn in the side of Antonio Gibson rather than a player who's going to contribute right away unless Antonio Gibson gets hurt. But he's dealt with leg injuries in the past, so that could happen sooner than later. But they did retain J.D. McKissick, who has that pass-catching role all to himself. I don't think he's going anywhere, and at least in his rookie year, Brian Robinson does not have much upside. So kind of a bummer there, but in the fourth round, Dameon Pierce was taken by the Houston Texans, and I love his tape. He has a lot of burst. He's really entertaining to watch, but again, not a really good landing spot. The Houston Texans brought in Marlon Mack and Dare Ogunbowale, but they didn't have many successful running backs last year. Even though Dameon Pierce is going to compete for this job, I really envision a committee here. I think Marlon Mack has something to prove, and he's going to eat into that workload for Dameon Pierce. They're not going to score a lot of touchdowns either, so I don't like this landing spot, but he will have a consistent role this year. I do think on a weekly basis he will have some decent value, especially in PPR formats. But not a lot of scoring potential. Don't really love it for Dameon Pierce. However, the next running back taken is a player I was really high on coming into the draft. Zamir White out of Georgia is a player I believe in. He was my number 5 running back in my pre-draft rankings, and he's 6'2", 214. He doesn't catch many passes. He kind of has small hands, but he did have a good landing spot. He is going to be the backup to Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas, but Josh Jacobs is not the most guaranteed player to stay healthy, and Josh Jacobs will definitely hold on to his pass-catching role, but I think he's definitely going to cede some touches to Zamir White, especially as the year goes on. I think Zamir White will emerge as their RB1 by next year, but in this backfield, there's a chance that he gets a pretty big role early on, because Josh McDaniels has used multiple running backs in New England in the past. I really believe in Zamir White's talent. Running backs from Georgia usually have a lot of success. He could have some upside, but I don't expect a big workload for him year one, that's for sure. But one thing I didn't like about this pick is that the Raiders traded up with Minnesota in order to snipe the Chargers with Zamir White, who took a running back right after this pick. Immediately after, they took Isaiah Spiller, who I did have at number 4 in my pre-draft rankings, but I was kind of hoping that they would get Zamir White because the Chargers don't really need a pass-catching running back. They have Eckler and Justin Jackson, and while Isaiah Spiller is really talented, I'm a little bit concerned about his hand size. He may have some fumbling issues, but long-term, I think he has some really high upside being tied to Justin Herbert. And if you are in a dynasty league, I think Isaiah Spiller is a really, really interesting pick. But this year, he's definitely not overtaking Eckler. I think he may have like 8 or 10 touches a game because Eckler has dealt with some injuries in the past, and I think they want to scale back his workload. But it's going to be pretty fluky to predict Isaiah Spiller and any of these running backs drafted in the later rounds. It's just kind of hard to bet on them when they already have more established veterans above them. But keep an eye on him. He is interesting. However, Pierre Strong Jr. went to the Patriots, and I didn't really like the Patriots draft very much. And they have a big running back platoon already. So this is not a player who's going to contribute at a high level very quickly. He's very fast, but it's going to be really fluky to predict. And I'm not too excited about this committee in New England. But Pierre Strong was a 4th-round pick, and so was Hassan Haskins, taken by Tennessee about 4 picks later. So he's the handcuff to Derrick Henry, and if anything happens to him, we saw what could happen with D'Onta Foreman filling in for him last year. But until that happens, Hassan Haskins has like no value. He might see 3 or 4 touches per game. Derrick Henry's workload isn't going anywhere. You really need to bank on injury in order for Haskins to have value. But an interesting handcuff to keep in mind. And Tyler Allgeier was the next running back taken. He was my 10th running back in my pre-draft rankings. And going to Atlanta does give him some upside because they did not have an established running back last year. They had Cordero Patterson and Mike Davis in the fold. And both of them are veterans that are better in the passing game than via the run. And Tyler Allgeier's specialty is running the ball, especially near the goal line. He had over 1,600 rushing yards last year and 23 touchdowns on the ground for BYU. But that's not exactly the toughest conference in college football, so there may be some acclimating for him, some time that it takes to get used to the NFL competition. But I really think that he has some value and a very consistent role this year. I think Patterson is, only getting older. He turned 31, and I really don't think that he's going to be their main back. Tyler Allgeier could get a really big workload and all of those goal line rushes. So the offense is the only concern that I have, but the opportunity is there for him. I think he's one player who will have a more consistent role at the running back position all season long, but is more touchdown dependent than anything else. After this, though, it's really nothing but handcuffs and some depth pieces. The Jaguars drafted Snoop Conner out of Ole Miss to back up Travis Etienne. James Robinson is coming off an Achilles injury, but he is still there. Don't really think he'll have a big workload. And Jerome Ford is the third string running back in Cleveland. So there's some upside for Jerome Ford. I had him as my number 8 running back coming into the draft. And going to Cleveland is a good vote of confidence. Kevin Stefanski knows how to spot running back talent. He knows how to use them very well. I mean, just look at Dearness Johnson when he was the starter. But unless there's an injury to Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb, don't expect much from Jerome Ford. Kareem Hunt's contract expires at the end of this year. I think next year he'll have a big role. But for now, Jerome Ford is nothing but a handcuff to those other 2 running backs. Kyren Williams, though, is an interesting piece in LA. They have dealt with some injuries in the past at the running back position, but he more so just hurts Cam Akers' value. I also think there's a chance that they bring back Sony Michel and have 4 running backs to go with. But Darrell Henderson is still the backup, so Kyren Williams is not really a player that will have much of an impact this season, just a depth play. And Ty Chandler is in the same boat. He's going to be the third stringer in Minnesota behind Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. But maybe in the future, I think he will be involved. I think they might move off of Mattison and have Chandler as their backup. However, Kevin Harris is a player I was pretty high on. I had him at number 6, I want to say, in my pre-draft rankings, and I was definitely too high on him. He fell, in my opinion. But similar to Pierre Strong, not a good landing spot in New England. There's just too many running backs here, and I really don't think you can count on anyone to have consistent production. Dameon Harris took a big hit in value in this year's draft. But Tyler Badie, several spots behind him in the 6th round, was taken by Baltimore, and he's their third stringer, but they've also dealt with injuries in the past. So if J.K. Dobbins can't get it going, if something happens to him, then I think Tyler Badie could see a lot of work in the passing game because Gus Edwards only runs the ball up the middle. He does not catch any passes. So that is unfortunate for J.K. Dobbins, but if they do get injured, then Tyler Badie could be an interesting piece, a player you might want to stash in best ball or very, very deep leagues. But just more of a 4-headed monster at the running back position in Baltimore. I don't want to count on him. The last player I'm going to mention who is really interesting, though, is Keaontay Ingram, drafted by the Cardinals in the late 6th round. And they lost some depth at the running back position. Chase Edmonds went to Miami, and he was an important part of their offense last year, but not on the goal line. That's not something you can expect from Keaontay Ingram. That job is firmly belonging to James Conner. However, James Conner is really the only running back above him on the depth chart, and it's not like he's been able to sustain good health, especially when he gets a big workload. I mean, even last year when Chase Edmonds went down, at some point James Conner got hurt and he missed time. So that could happen again this season, and at some point in the year, Ingram could vault into that RB1 role for the Cardinals, and there is some elite upside in that offense. So he has some appeal in best ball drafts, but unless you're taking him really late in a deeper format, I think you just save him for the waiver wire. He's not going to be an important player in week 1, that's for sure. But Trestan Ebner went to Chicago, kind of an interesting backup there, just low expectations in my opinion. Brittain Brown went to Las Vegas, another backup for them. And Isaiah Pacheco was the last running back drafted in the 7th round. He went to Kansas City. So some very disappointing landing spots and situations for some of these players. It's hard to have high expectations, but let's sort through these names. I'm going to give you some rankings and put them into tiers for what I expect in 2022. All right, so here are my most valuable rookie running backs this year. In that first tier, we have immediate running back ones. Breece Hall is definitely number 1, and Kenneth Walker is close behind him, but I think they're in a tier of their own. I really don't think anyone is going to see volume comparable to them. However, James Cook is the first player in tier 2, where they will have a role, but it's not as big as you want it to be. But James Cook is a really, really valuable piece in tier 2, and there is a considerable drop in value between him and Tyler Allgeier, but he does have some good opportunity in front of him, and there is a chance he scores a lot of touchdowns this year. So Tyler Allgeier is interesting, and so is Dameon Pierce. That rounds out this tier, but I do not expect too many touches for these players. I think 10 or 12 is kind of the cap for them, at least in the first half of the season. After this, though, you are really entering handcuff territory, and while the upside might be elite for these players, you are banking on an injury above them in order for them to pay off. But Rachaad White is really, really valuable. So is Tyrion Davis-Price. Isaiah Spiller and Zamir White come in right behind them. But Keaontay Ingram, Brian Robinson, and Hassan Haskins are very interesting handcuffs to own as well. I do think they would have a big role if the player above them went down, and they do round out this tier. But after this, we're going into more of depth plays. These guys are mainly third-string running backs, and they could pop if the situation was right, but it's really unlikely to see anything from them this season given the depth above them. But Snoop Conner, Tyler Badie, Jerome Ford, Kyren Williams, Chandler, Pierre Strong Jr., and so is Kevin Harris, all in the sleeper tier. I don't expect anything from them this year, but long-term, they may have some interesting value. That's going to be it for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Adam Riancho. I hope you have a great day, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.